I never had a woman in my life, and I hate saying it out loud because it makes me sound even more pathetic than I actually thought I was. But it was the truth of it. I got to over 50, and not once did I manage to have a girlfriend. I never even had a chance to experience what it was really like, and that took me to some very dark places. Looking back, I can see how empty I really was. But the problem was, it wasn't like I wasn't trying because I really tried. I was just a hollow and empty version of the person I thought I was meant to be. When I started going out with my mates when I was 16, 17 and 18, they all seemed to have luck with the girls, yet I never did, and I couldn't understand why. I tried to tell myself that eventually something would happen, but I was waiting for it to happen, thinking it should happen by itself, but it never worked. I tried to pretend that I didn't care, but of course I cared. Everyone would in that position. I was just lying to myself. I buried it away the best I could after I left school. I wanted to go to university, but I just didn't have the confidence, so I went straight to work. I started working, and that's all I did. Deep down, nothing felt right, and that's why, when I got to Thailand, anything was better than what I had to start with. I didn't know I was walking around with a target on my back, and I should have known better from the first time I went into a bar and had girls smiling all around me. I should have walked out, but I stayed, and I let it happen because it was all I thought I could have. That's why I married her, a bar girl, who saw me for exactly what I really was, a lonely old idiot with money in the bank and no spine. I thought I'd finally cracked the code, that I'd beaten whatever curse had haunted me for so long at home, but I was wrong. All I'd really done was set myself up for the worst fall imaginable, and I watched my savings vanish and the debts pile up. I signed away my entire future, and I did it all while thinking I was happy, because it meant I wasn't alone anymore. By the time I finally realised what had happened, it was already too late. There was nothing left to save. Work was all I ever seemed to do that meant anything, and it's not like I actually enjoyed it either. I tried to convince myself, though, that it was fine, because it was all I could manage. I left school with nothing special to show for that. No university, no qualifications worth talking about, and I had no direction apart from finding a job that would take me. I went straight into whatever I could get first, and the hours always seemed to be endless, but I stuck at it because that was the only thing that I seemed to be able to get right. I'd watch everyone else around me moving on, building their lives and getting married, starting families even, while I was just doing the same year in and year out, going home alone every night. I thought if I kept myself busy that would be good enough. But I suppose really I was just hiding from the truth that I had nothing waiting for me outside of work. In the early days I'd go to the pub with mates, but as the years dragged on, everyone seemed to go their separate ways, and by the time I was 30 I had no friends at all. I tried to make changes every now and then, going to the gym to get out of the house, trying different styles of clothes to see if that gave me more confidence. And I even tried to talk to women when I got the nerve, but I never really got the nerve and nothing stuck. Nothing worked, and I always ended up back where I started. The years kept rolling on, and I started to realise I was stuck in a loop. Everyone was building their lives, and I was standing still. In a way, standing still and wasting time, hoping things would change when I got older. That was a constant throughout my life, hoping for something to change, hoping something would change automatically without me having to brute force it. But that's not how it worked. By the time I reached my 50s, I'd built up some savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to get by, and I had a great credit score because I'd paid off a mortgage on my small house. That would come back to haunt me. When I first went to Thailand, it was a way to see if I would have any luck there. I'd only planned on staying there for a month, just to see what it was like, because I thought if it was no good, then I'd just go back to England and carry on the same as before. But if it gave me something different, then maybe I'd think about going back there later. I didn't go out there with the idea of living there. I was just clutching at straws at this point, but the truth of it is that the eventual meeting with one girl I had, that would decide everything. Because if I never met her, I probably wouldn't have moved there, at least not so soon. But I did. I did meet her, and that changed everything for me. My first night there, I stepped inside a bar and it felt like another world. I could already feel myself getting uncomfortable as soon as I sat down, as if I didn't belong there, and I kept my beer close to me, but I wasn't really drinking it. My eyes kept jumping to all the girls walking between the tables. They all seemed to be wearing the same style of short skirts, the same high heels that made those noises as they walked. And I watched them laughing with all the men there, as if they'd known them their whole lives. I tried my best not to stare at the girls too hard, but every now and then a girl would lean over towards me and I would feel a sense of panic come over me, and I'd snap my eyes away from them before I had a chance to make eye contact. I was worried I was going to be made to look like a fool. It amazed me that all the other men in there didn't hide their feelings. They were able to just look at girls, look them up and down and call them over like it was nothing, and they could speak to them. They invited them to sit down, they invited them for drinks. I wanted to do that, but I just sat there thinking, how could I? I wished I could, but it was as if my mind spoke, but my mouth stayed closed. I developed a habit because I was still thinking I was in a very dodgy place, a habit to always check my wallet was in my pocket, making sure no one had taken it from me, but I think that was just an excuse for me to leave quickly. I really wanted to enjoy this experience like everyone else seemed to be able to. I wanted to just relax into it and let it happen, but I simply couldn't shake the feeling that all the eyes in there were on me, even though they weren't. Nobody cared what I was doing. The problem was, I did. That night, I went back to my hotel, feeling like a complete failure. I shut the door behind me and just paced up and down the room, sitting down and standing up again, picking things up and putting them straight down, knowing I'd wasted the whole night because I didn't have the guts to do what every other bloke around me had been doing without even a second thought. I kept replaying it over and over again in my head, the way they could just wave a girl over and talk to her and laugh and act like it was the most normal thing in the world, and I hated myself for freezing up. I tried to convince myself that it was only the first night, that at least I'd tried, and the flight home was a month away, so I could give it another go. The next night, I walked back down the same street and forced myself inside a different bar. I didn't feel any different, at least not straight away, but I sat down anyway and ordered a beer Leo, and I hoped something would happen for me. I spent the first hour the same way as the previous day, just slowly sipping at the beer, keeping my eyes low and watching the girls walk past me, and then looking away as soon as they looked back. After a while, one of them stopped beside me and asked if she could sit down. She didn't shout it across the room or make a show of it like some of the other girls did. She just approached me very delicately, saying, "Nice to meet you, Ka," and she reached out her hand to shake mine. And before I could even think about it, she was sitting next to me and I'd agreed to buy her a drink. It was the way she looked at me. It was the way she looked, and I was really nervous and looked around to see if anyone was watching, but there wasn't. No one was paying attention to me, but it felt like everyone was. I knew I should have been more careful, that this was probably what she did with every man who walked in there, but I didn't care, because for once I wasn't invisible. That was everything I needed in that moment, everything I dreamed of happening to me for the past 40 years, and it took leaving my own country and travelling to Thailand to find it. I didn't know what I should tell her or what I shouldn't. I didn't want to tell her that I never had a girlfriend before, so I just followed her lead. If she asked questions to me, I answered them and asked back the same sorts of questions. I wasn't confident enough to come up with my own things to say, and it seemed to be the easiest thing to do. I started to let my guard down and relax, and before I knew it, I'm ordering a lot more drinks for myself and even more for her. And then we're leaving the bar. And then all I could think about the following morning was making sure that I didn't lose this opportunity that I had with this amazing girl. She was 21, called Fawn, and she was from Buri Ram. After she left the following morning, I couldn't get her out of my head. All day it was just her. The way she tilted her head and said, "You come back tonight, nah," before she left, and the stupid rush I felt when she smiled. I kept thinking if I didn't go back, I'd lose the only chance I was ever likely to get. I tried to eat something, but I couldn't eat. I didn't have an appetite. So I walked up and down Sukhumvit Road that day, just looking at my phone and looking around me, waiting for the clock to tick down. I convinced myself that she'd already be with someone else by the time I got there, that I'd stand like an idiot and she'd laugh with the other guy, and then I would feel bad. When it finally turned dark, I was already outside her place just waiting to go inside, and I pretended to look at my phone as if I wasn't actually caring about what the outcome was going to be. She saw me straight away and came over like she'd been waiting for me after what happened the previous day, and I felt different than I had ever felt before. It was as if I was no longer invisible. It wasn't that I suddenly became brave, but I wasn't frozen either, and I could sit properly and look her in the face, and I could answer without my throat closing. One thing that stuck out was a cheap silver bracelet with a tiny bell on that made a faint sound when she lifted her glass, and a little rabbit clip in her hair. That was something I noticed because I was looking at her like this could be everything. She asked me about the things I did in my own country and talked about England, and asked what my family was like and if I missed them. I just told her I didn't have a wife or kids, and then she just said, "Great, better for me." From then on, I went back every night, and she always went with me, and soon it wasn't just a bar. We went to eat together at a place a few doors down from where the bar was, and that was nice. And then one day we went to Expat and got on a bus to Pattaya, and ended up in Jomtien. The way she held my hand like it was the most normal thing in the world was amazing, and I'd never walked a beach with a woman before, not once in 50-odd years, and I decided right then it had to be real, because why else would she give me that kind of time? By the end of the month, I hadn't seen much of Thailand. I'd only seen her, and I told myself it was enough, because honestly, I believed I'd finally found what I'd been missing my whole life. It was on my final night, when we were down in Pattaya, walking along Beach Road with the bars lit up behind us and the sea in front, that I stopped on the sand and I asked her to marry me. The place was swarming with girls calling out to men as they passed, but I barely noticed any of that going on. I was so caught up in my own head that it felt like it was just the two of us there, and I managed to drown out all the noise. I got on one knee in the sand and I asked her, "Will you marry me?" She covered her mouth with her hand and said yes. She said it twice because she wanted to make sure I'd heard it, and then that was all I needed. She pulled me up and held me close, and I believed everything. I believed I'd finally done the thing I was meant to do. I wasn't thinking about how quick it was or if it made sense. I wasn't thinking about money or the life that I had in England. I was only thinking about her and what it meant to be engaged. Right there, I decided to go home, sell my house, sell my car, cash in whatever I had, and come back as fast as I could. On the bus back to Bangkok the following day, I kept hearing her yes over and over. It was the best thing I'd ever heard in my life. By the time I was packing my bag for the flight, I wasn't dragging my feet. I was actually eager, because going home meant being able to return as quickly as I could to start my new and exciting life with her by my side. When we got to Bangkok, I gave her more than enough money to last her through the month, and we agreed she could spend the time with her family in Buriram until I returned. And then we parted ways. I felt upset in the moment as I left her, but it was mixed with a strange kind of happiness because I knew I'd be back soon, and that was enough to get me to the airport and onto the plane home. Back in England, I spoke to her every night while she was in Buriram with her family, and I kept telling myself I was right on the edge of a new life, everything I'd always wanted, and all I had to do was get my money in order and I'd be straight back out there with her. I'd already scraped together about £20,000 from savings and from selling my car, and even though it didn't feel like a fortune, it was more than enough to get me back to Thailand and keep me going until my house sold. My place was a small 2-bedroom back-to-back terrace, the kind of house that was never going to make me rich, but it was always going to sell fast because landlords snapped them up in my area. They were cheap to buy and very easy to rent out. The estate agent told me that there was already interest in it, and it should sell pretty quickly, which sounded good to me. Once it was sold, I'd be looking at around £70,000, which, added to £20,000, meant I'd be sitting on close to £90,000, more money than I'd ever had in one go my entire life. Remember walking around the empty rooms of the house after the agent had taken photos, looking at the walls and telling myself that this was the last time I'd be living there. It was the end of my old life, the life I'd wasted, and that I was finally moving on to something better. I told her over the phone that I'd be back in about 10 days, and she sounded very happy, and that gave me even more of a push to get things moving. In my head, it all looked so easy. I'd go back to Bangkok with her waiting for me, we'd find a place to live, I'd get a job after settling in, and then I could retire in 20 years' time and would be great. I had the confidence that with £20,000 already behind me, and another £70,000 coming soon, I'd be able to settle in and make things work. I kept telling myself that this was the chance I'd waited for my whole life, and all I needed to do was get the house sold and I'd finally be where I was meant to be, starting a new life in Thailand with her. When I called her from England that I'd booked the flight and I'd be there in 10 days, the truth was my ticket was for a week, but I wanted to keep that part to myself so I could surprise her. My idea was to ring her when I landed and tell her to get the bus down from Buriram, and I'd be waiting for her at the station in Bangkok like a proper husband-to-be should. That was all I was thinking about on the flight, but when I got there it was already late and I was restless and I didn't want to go and relax in the hotel and sit by myself. So I decided I'd take a walk to the bar where I first met her, just for old time's sake, just to see it again before she came back to the city. When I walked into the place, it was really busy. The music was going and there were men sitting at tables and girls with them, just like it was when I went there the first time. But then I saw her. She had a drink in front of her and she was sitting very close to some guy, pressed up against him like it wasn't the first time, and they were talking in each other's ears. My stomach turned and I couldn't move. I just stood there for a second and then I turned and walked back out before either of them could see me. I walked back to my hotel and the whole time my hands were shaking. As soon as I got to the room, I called her and she answered, and she told me she was with her family in Buriram. The same thing she'd been saying every time I'd spoken since I left. I didn't know what to say at first, so I just told her I was in Bangkok now. There was a silence and then she said she'd happy that I'd come back, and her voice sounded bright like nothing was wrong. I reminded myself that I'd given her £1,000 when I left. That was more than enough for her and her family, and I told myself that what I'd seen in the bar didn't matter, because she had been working there for a few years before we met, and maybe 100 men had promised her the same things I had. Maybe she didn't believe I was really coming back, and was just protecting herself until she knew for sure. I convinced myself that that was the truth, that she had lied only because she thought I'd lied to her first, and that was fair enough. I told her to come to my hotel right away and she agreed, but it was about 4 hours before she turned up. I knew what that meant, I wasn't blind, but I told myself that was finished now, it was never going to happen again, and when I saw her walk through the door smiling at me, I let it all go. I was just glad she was there, glad she hadn't left me waiting, and I pushed the whole thing down and told myself to forget the bus station, forget the bar, and start again like none of it had ever happened. The morning after she came to the hotel, I pushed what I'd seen at the bar to the back of my mind and just carried on as if nothing like that happened, because it felt great being with her. The next days were brilliant. We'd go down to the breakfast buffet in the hotel dining room, and I found it fascinating that they had such strange options for breakfast, like savoury Thai meals with rice, but it was 9 a.m. That's what she seemed to eat anyway, so I planned to just follow her lead, because we were in Thailand and I wanted to do things the Thai way. The hotel was quite close to Central World and we went there often, and one day she pointed at a handbag and I bought it for her without thinking twice. That was £600, but the look on her face gave me more than the money could. Every small thing we did, it felt new to me. I told myself that this is what being in love was meant to be, and I'd finally found it, and I had to hold on to it. It's not like I loved Thailand. Some things made me very uncomfortable, but being with her, I would have been anywhere with her. We were already engaged and I didn't see any point in waiting around, so I told her I wanted to get married quickly. And when she said she wanted to, it felt like all the doubts I had were washed away. In my head, I turned it into proof. I told myself again that what I'd seen in the bar was her just protecting herself, because if she didn't love me, she wouldn't marry me anyway. When we started talking about how it would work, she told me about something called Sinsot, and I'd never heard of that before. She explained it as a way that the man has to pay money to the family as a sign of respect and to show he's serious. And I sat there quite confused because it was so different to my culture, but I accepted it. Even though I thought weddings were just about rings and a ceremony, I was in her country, so I was happy to do it her way. The figure she and her family settled on was 250,000 baht, with another 150,000 for the wedding itself, so it was just under £10,000 out of the 20,000 I had in my account. She spoke with her family on the phone about it, although I had no idea what they were saying, and she even passed the phone to me, and I managed to say a swaddy crap, but not much more. They sounded happy, but I don't know if they were or not, And this was her mother and father, by the way. So I told myself that that must mean they liked me. We spent a while ironing out the details, but in the end it was agreed. We'd marry in her village in 2 weeks' time. That felt really fast, but it also made me feel secure, like nothing could go wrong now. Those 2 weeks in the hotel went by so quickly, and in the evenings when she started watching those Thai soap operas on the TV, I thought that was her feeling comfortable with me, especially the way she held my hand as she watched. When the day came, we travelled up to Buriram and I met her family. I met them properly for the first time, and I can't lie, I felt out of place the whole time. The ceremony was loud and full of people, and everyone spoke Thai, and the rituals they did were so strange I didn't understand them, and I sat there sweating like a pig in clothes that you had no business wearing in such insane heat. I bowed to people when I was told to, and tried my best to look like I knew what was happening, but I kept trying to shake people's hands and they looked at me like, "What are you doing?" They had no idea what I was trying to do. Some of them did, but some didn't. I didn't enjoy it at all. It was far too different for me, and I felt completely out of my comfort zone. But I went through it because I loved her and I wanted to give her and her family the respect they deserved. After it was done, we went back to Bangkok and checked into a hotel, and when I found out that being married meant I could get a better visa to stay in Thailand, it felt even better, like everything was falling into place. We stayed in that hotel for about a week while we were looking around for apartments, and it was so exciting walking around to different parts of the city with her and talking about what kind of place would be best. We looked at lots of different places, and one thing that I still think about today is the way she walked around with an umbrella and always said, "Can we go in a taxi instead?" And while I gave in most of the time, the walking was fun for me, but she just didn't like being out in the sun. We decided that Prakanong was the area we wanted to live in. It felt like it was close enough to the centre and not quite as expensive as some of the other places, and it felt great being there. We looked at lots of units, and we eventually found one we were both happy with, and I handed over 2 months' deposit and 1 month in advance. The monthly rent was 18,000 baht, so I thought that was great. The unit was already fully furnished, and there were a few things we needed to buy though, mainly bedding and towels, and I bought some cutlery and plates and a few bowls. When we were buying those things for our place, I also bought her a brand new iPhone as a wedding gift. It felt great to be able to treat her to things that I felt like she never had a chance to experience in her life before. Her old phone wasn't working as well as it should have done either. From moving in to finally things settled, it took 2 or 3 days, I think, getting everything we needed. One morning I woke up with nothing to do, and that's when I felt like this was right. It was around this time that I got an email from the estate agent saying I had an offer on my house for the asking price, so I accepted it. And then I got in touch with my solicitor, who said it should take about 2 months to complete because they were cash buyers. That sounded good to me. Only 2 months and then I'm going to get all that money. It was great news. By then I'd already spent just under £10,000 for the wedding, and on top of that the handbag and the phone and the deposit on the condo and the advanced rent, as well as things we bought for the living expenses, I think I had about £7,000 in the bank, but it felt like a great deal of money to me still. It was around this time that I went to immigration and got my initial 30-day extended for 15, and then it was my plan to go back to get the marriage visa quite soon. It was such an exciting time. I was so excited that I was married and living with her, and even more excited about the idea of getting myself a job soon. I was convinced that within a few weeks I'd be earning an expat salary and everything would finally be as it was always meant to be. When I finally started looking into jobs properly, the first shock came when I realised I couldn't just walk into a normal office role like I'd always imagined. I thought I'd be earning something like £2,000 a month working at an office in Bangkok, but every advert I looked at said Thai people only, and that's when they were written in English, which was not very often. The very few expat positions I came across were for specialist roles, and that wasn't me. And that was so disappointing because I'd built this up thinking it would be easy. I didn't even understand how it all worked. I just thought you applied for a work permit and then you could work anywhere. But in Thailand, I found out, a work permit is tied to a specific company and job, and that was something I never realised. While I was trying to figure it out, she kept pointing out little things she wanted. A gold necklace one day and new shoes a few days after that. I didn't see any harm because I had money and more money coming from the house soon, so I bought them for her and it felt good doing it. In between that, I realised that teaching was probably the only thing I could do until I got the house money, So I started contacting some agencies, and one of them said that they could give me a guaranteed job if I took a TEFL course. It would cost 50,000 baht, but it sounded okay. I didn't like the sound of the 30,000 baht a month salary, but for the time being, it sounded okay. So I signed up and spent a month on the course, sitting in classrooms with a bunch of other foreigners, most of them a lot younger than me, some taking it seriously and most of them just messing around. I felt very old there. But I stuck it out, and near the end, I was offered a position. 2 days after finishing, I'd be able to start. The salary was 33,000 baht, and even though it meant a long taxi ride every day, I thought it was okay and it was a start. The only problem was, I didn't have a university degree, so I couldn't get a work permit. But the agency told me not to worry about it because plenty of people worked without work permits and the risks were minimal. During this time, my 15-day extension was almost up, and I went to immigration with my wife and a bunch of photos from the wedding, thinking I'd walk out stamped with a year-long marriage visa. I was told that it wasn't possible because we weren't legally married. I couldn't believe it. I thought that the village ceremony was enough and that's how people did things, but they told me I needed to go back out of the country because my stay ended the following day. I left immigration furious but also a bit embarrassed. I'd wasted money on the trip and the paperwork, and I kept telling myself it would be sorted. All of it seemed to be happening all at once: the job, the visa, the spending, and waiting for the house money, everything. When I finally stood outside the school on my first day of teaching, having got a new 30-day stamp and arranging the paperwork I needed to marry legally, I told myself I was lucky I'd taken the job because the money from the house was still a while away and I only had about £1,000 left. It didn't take long for me to hate the job. Almost from the first week, I knew it wasn't for me. Standing in front of a classroom full of kids and being told to dance around and act like a fool just to keep them entertained. The worst thing was having to impress the parents who would come in and watch sometimes, as if seeing a foreigner standing there was the reason why they were paying these school fees. I was also made to stand at the gate in the mornings, smiling and saying hello to the kids, and it felt humiliating, but I forced myself through it because I thought it was the start and at least I was earning something. Not long after starting that job, we went to register the marriage properly so that we could move forwards with the visa, but I knew I would still need to leave the country again to get the right non-immigrant visa. I thought it was just one step getting closer to where I wanted to be. The daily travel, though, with work was a huge shock because the school was on the opposite side of Bangkok, and every day I was spending 300 to 400 baht on taxis, which was a huge cut out of my 33,000 baht salary. I did keep telling myself it would be fine once everything evened out. I would go home in the evenings and she'd be there, lying on bed, watching TV, or just scrolling on her iPhone. She never seemed to do much of anything, but I didn't let it bother me because I was in love with her and I thought this is how it was. One evening, after a particular hard day at school, I even took her out and bought her something else that she asked for. I didn't count the cost because I told myself my salary was due in a few weeks and there was nothing to worry about. But just when I thought I had everything sorted out, I got the news that the people buying my house had pulled out, and suddenly the whole sale had collapsed. I felt sick reading that email. All the money I had been counting on had vanished just like that, and I sat there panicked and worried, upset that I'd built everything on the promise of that cash and now I wasn't going to have it soon. Not long after the bad news about the house sale falling through, I decided I needed to do something to make myself feel comfortable again. So I went and took out a cash advance on my credit card, and the most I could get was £15,000. It was a huge amount of money for me, but having it sitting there in the bank in Thailand, it gave me a false sense of comfort, like I was back in control and I could use it to extend my visa. I told myself it was only temporary because once the house sold, I could pay it off straight away and be in the clear. Around the same time, I had to go and get a non-immigrant visa, so I went with my wife to Laos. It felt like a small adventure, getting the bus across the border and waiting around at the embassy. It was great to see something different, and even though it was stressful, I felt relief when I finally had the visa. Going back to Bangkok, I thought things were finally lining up. The money from the credit card meant I could relax, and the visa meant I could stop worrying about being sent out of the country. Back at school, I settled into it, but I still hated all of it. Standing there day after day trying to teach, forcing myself to smile, while deep down I just wanted to be anywhere else. For the first time, I also had to send money to her family. It wasn't a big amount, but it was something specific that her brother needed, and I handed it over because I wanted to make sure she was happy. Between that, the rent, the food, and the taxes to school, all of this, the salary of 33,000 didn't stretch enough. It was nowhere near enough to live the way I thought we should be living. I wanted to take her out and buy things for her all the time. And I did, and I continued doing that. But as of yet, I didn't start to panic because I kept telling myself the house money was going to come through soon, so I could continue to spend. Once the house completed, then I could start doing my own thing and make my own money. So I'd just have to work for a while longer. I felt amazing when I got an email that I had another offer on my house, again a cash buyer, and again for the asking price. So I took it and told my solicitor that this was urgent, it needed to complete as quickly as possible. It felt like all the pressure I'd been under was lifted, and I kept checking my email constantly, hoping for news from my solicitor that things had finally gone through and that the money was on the way. I knew I needed to keep 400,000 baht in the bank for a few months so that I could extend my visa, and after that I knew I could dip into it. So I made sure I wouldn't slip underneath before going for the extension. From what I had left after the trip to Laos and the small money left from my salary, I could still afford to buy her things when she asked. I remember one day she pointed at a bracelet in a gold shop and I bought it for her on the spot. The thing was, I felt proud being able to give it to her, even though the money was draining away. The months went by and I managed to extend the visa, and eventually the money from the house sale cleared and I felt so good paying off the £15,000 credit card debt straight away and transferring the rest to Thailand. Looking at the balance with the equivalent of £55,000 in my account, I thought this was so amazing. There was no chance things could go wrong now. It gave me a rush of confidence. I think that's the best way to describe it. To celebrate the house sale finally coming through, we decided to go up to see her family, and I thought I wanted to bring them some gifts because I hadn't given them gifts yet. I bought her mother a really thick gold necklace from one of the shops near Victory Monument that we like to go to, and I got her father a case of whiskey, which cost quite a lot, but I thought he'd appreciate it. Handing it over to them in the village and seeing the smiles, it felt good. It felt like I was accepted. Around the same time, I bought a second-hand Toyota for around 200,000 baht, telling myself it would make things easier. But in truth, I bought it for her because I thought she deserved it, and I felt good giving it to her. Back in Bangkok, I started looking for something else to do with myself, and I read about call centre jobs where you could sit at home and take calls for companies back in England, and many people said they were earning around £1,000 a month. I thought that sounded decent enough, so I started applying and convinced myself it was only a matter of time. The problem was that in the meantime, the money kept leaking out faster than I could keep track. One of the biggest drains was when I decided to help her brother set up a shop in the village, putting in 400,000 baht just to get him started with the stock and rent. I thought it would tie me to the family and show I loved them and was serious. On top of that, there were endless little things. She always wanted new clothes and I'd buy them, petrol for the car, meals out almost every night because we didn't cook and that's what we did. Short trips every now and then. We stayed at resorts every now and then. And by the time I added it all up, I'd blown through £10,000 in what felt like no time at all. And even though I told myself it didn't matter because I had plenty left, there was a quiet worry going on, but I just managed to ignore it. It took me about a month to get the call centre job, and almost straight away I hated it. Staring at a screen all night because I had to work UK hours, the endless repetition of saying the same lines over and over, and the dullness of it just drained me. Every shift felt like it went on forever and I couldn't see myself lasting there very long. To make myself feel better, I started spending even more money, buying her things she asked for without thinking, eating out again all the time, telling myself it didn't matter because I had plenty left. Around the same time, I started thinking maybe I should go back to teaching. But again, I knew I hated it and it wasn't enough money. I spoke to my wife about it, saying that I needed to do something, but I worded it as if to say I wanted to do something I enjoyed rather than needing the money. That was when she said if we moved up to Buriram, we could live in her village, and I could probably find a school job there. It might not pay as much, but if we had our own house, we wouldn't have any other bills to pay, and we could live for a lot less. The idea attracted me straight away, not realising at the time that plenty of other foreigners had been caught by the same thought, that building in the village would be the answer. After only a week at the call centre, I had to quit. I hated it so much, and I told myself Buriram would be the fresh start. I contacted that same agency that had given me the first teaching job, asking if they had anything in Buri Ram, and somehow they did. The salary was only 25,000 baht, but it was in Buriram town and her village was 25 minutes away. And since I bought the car, that didn't bother me. I thought this was the solution, that finally everything was going to work out. As much as I didn't like the village, I wanted to be with her, and whatever it took, I was willing to do it. At this point, I probably had £40,000 left in my accounts. 400,000 of that was ring-fenced for the visa, and I thought that was great, more than enough to build a great life. When we sat down and talked about it, it felt like we found the answer. So I took that teaching job in Buriram, and we rented a small place to get started. Almost straight away, we began looking for land. Before long, we found a plot that cost 400,000 baht. I handed the money over without even thinking about it. The figure in my account still looked big enough that it didn't seem like a problem. Not long after that, we agreed to start building a house. It was just going to be a small place for 1 million baht, but it would give us somewhere to live comfortably. It felt like the right move because once it was finished, we wouldn't be wasting money on rent every month and we'd finally have somewhere that belonged. Every day, I drove to the school from the rental we had, and even though the job only paid 25,000 baht, I didn't mind at first because it gave me something to do, and the house project was something that we always thought about. The spending, it never seemed to stop. The rent for the place we were in, the food, the petrol, small things for the house, money for her family, and every stage of the build seemed to need another payment. I wasn't able to keep track of things properly. I only saw the balance in my account and assumed that meant there was still room to spend. 6 months passed just like that, and by the time the house was there, I felt great walking through the rooms with her. And seeing her smile, that made it even better. I'd never imagined in my life I would own a home in Thailand, albeit through my wife, and it made me feel like the years I had wasted were not for nothing. The job in town was great, but the drive did become a bit tedious, but it became normal. But the money in the bank was still there, but it was less than before. It felt good though, knowing that at last we could build something together. At the end of it all, I had about £14,000 left, between what was in my accounts and the visa buffer, but it didn't concern me. It should have concerned me. The problem was that I thought once we moved into the new house, there wouldn't be anything more to buy. We could just settle into living. But it didn't work that way. I found myself spending the same as before, and I didn't have the heart to say no when she asked for something. I kept thinking it was easier to hand the money over to her instead of upsetting her, and before long the money I had left had all gone. That was when I went back to the credit card and took another £15,000 advance, the most I could get. And the moment I put it in my account in Thailand, I felt that same sense of false comfort that I had before. I told myself it would tide me over until something else came along, but the truth was I was just patching over holes, but none of these holes were ever going to close. I remember once when I didn't buy her a piece of gold she wanted, she sulked for 2 days and barely spoke to me, and I couldn't face that again. I knew that if it was just me, 25,000 baht would have been enough, easily enough, but I wasn't living for me anymore. I was living for her, and I didn't want her to feel bad. The anger started to creep in then because this wasn't what I had imagined. All I ever wanted was to live with her, to have that simple life together, but instead I was working jobs I hated and watching the money disappear faster than I could replace it. I didn't care about work, I didn't care about building anything. All I wanted was to be with her and for that to be enough, but it wasn't. I clung to the idea that things would sort themselves out, that something would come along to make it right, but it was just hope. I was holding on to hope. All the time I was hoping. 6 months later, that money was gone again, and I knew I couldn't keep going on the same way. So I had to put it to my wife that we needed to cut back on spending, but I didn't say it was because I was broke. I told her it was because I wanted to invest in a business for us, that if we had something in the village, it would be better than me teaching and we'd make more money. And she seemed to like the sound of that. I had seen some very wealthy people around and thought that was the way forward, never stopping to understand that those people were already rich, already owning land and shops, so of course it was easy for them. I spoke to her as if this was the plan, not desperation, and she agreed, saying she was happy to cut back for the time being if it meant we'd have something bigger later. That gave me the push to try one last thing, a personal loan back in the UK. Because I was still on the electoral register at my old place, I thought I could get away with it, and I filled out a form, lying quite a few times on it, just so they'd accept it. The only reason I thought it might work was because I paid off that credit card before, and I'd paid off my mortgage before, and I was making payments on the new cash advance I took on the card, and it went through. I got £25,000 transferred into my account, and for a few days, it gave me again more false feelings of confidence. Then we started looking into business ideas and quickly realised there was nothing to do in the village that would ever work, so we turned to Buriram. The idea we landed on was a small restaurant in the city, a few tables and a kitchen, and I convinced myself it was going to be the answer. I threw all of that money into it, paying for the rent, the renovation, the equipment, the stock and everything, and the doors opened. I thought this was it. It was going to be great. It was actually a last-ditch attempt. It was all or nothing. I know that was probably the worst decision I ever made, but by the time it hit me, there was nothing I could do to fix it. The restaurant had barely gotten off the ground before I started to see how hopeless everything was. I sat there at night waiting for customers to come in, but they never did. And when we did get customers in, we didn't make any money. In the first month, the place barely scraped a few thousand baht, and it was obvious there was no way it could last. By then, the loan money was draining out quicker than I could believe, and when I checked the balance, I realised I only had enough to keep things going for another 2 months at best. That was when I broke and told my wife the truth, that the money I put in came from a loan in England, that it was all I had left, and that once it was gone, there was nothing more. She looked at me with disgust, shouting that she hadn't left her family to sit in a failing restaurant with a man like me. She asked me straight out why she should stay with me if I had nothing, why she should waste her time with someone who couldn't provide for her, and she kept saying that she needed money not just for herself, but for her family too. Then, just to drive the knife in further, she told me she still had a boyfriend back in the village, and when I was away working at school, she used to see him all the time. And whether it was true or not, it didn't matter, because the damage was already done. I just sat there, listening to her words, feeling as if everything around me had collapsed all at once. The restaurant, the house, the marriage, all of it slipping away. I was £40,000 in debt, and I couldn't even imagine how I was going to climb back out of this problem. I couldn't stay in Thailand anymore. Without money, there was no way to survive. Without her, there was no reason to be there, and the weight of it all just pressed down on me so hard that I couldn't even think. Everything I'd worked for, everything I thought I was building, it was gone, just like that. And all I was left to is with the truth that I destroyed my life completely, just because I wanted love. I begged her to just wait for me, telling her I would find a way to sort everything out if she could just give me time. But she just laughed in my face and said there was no way she was going to wait for me because she hated me. That was the moment I knew it was over, that there was nothing left for me in Thailand. But the only thing I could do was get on a plane back to England and start from scratch. By then, I hadn't made payments on the loans or the credit card for a few months, so by the time I got back, I'd destroyed my credit completely. I had to declare bankruptcy, and watching everything I ever saved for vanish. I thought about all the decisions I'd made, every pound I'd spent, every bit of hope I'd held on to, and I couldn't see anything left to show for it. I had to accept that this whole thing was probably my first and last experience with a woman, and I sat there wishing I never bothered in the first place, because chasing that dream had left me with nothing but debt, shame, and the ruins of a life I could never hope to put back together.